The neon glow of Trauma Team International's logo burned through the smog-choked night sky above Watson, a crimson cross that promised salvation for those who could afford it. Marcus Chen had seen that symbol his entire life, plastered across billboards, emblazoned on the sides of AV4s, screaming through the air, tattooed into the collective consciousness of Night City as the ultimate insurance policy against death itself. He'd believed in it once back when he still believed corporations gave a damn about anything other than eddies. That was before his brother died on a sidewalk in Japantown, bleeding out from a gunshot wound while a Trauma Team AV hovered 30 feet above, running verification protocols. Before they let him flatline because his premium had lapsed by 48 hours. Before Marcus learned what the Red Cross really meant. Profit margins written in blood. Now he stood in the rain outside the Watson Medical Center, a gleaming tower of chrome and glass that rose 60 stories into the polluted sky, watching the endless stream of ambulances and corporate security vehicles flow in and out like blood through artificial veins. Somewhere inside that building, in one of the 1,000 identical operating theaters, they were installing military-grade cyberware into corpo executives while street kids died in the gutters outside. The irony wasn't lost on him. His optics flickered, overlaying data across his field of vision. The building's security protocols scrolled past in luminous green text, courtesy of a Netrunner contact who owed him a favor. 18 security checkpoints between the lobby and the sublevels. Armed guards on every floor. Biometric scanners, thermal cameras, pressure plates, the works. Getting in would be suicide for anyone who wasn't already supposed to be there. Good thing Marcus had spent the last 3 months becoming exactly that kind of person. The ID chip embedded in his forearm contained the digital identity of Dr. Jonathan Reeves, a trauma surgeon who'd been transferred from the Haywood branch 2 weeks ago. The real Reeves was currently enjoying an extended vacation in a shipping container at the docks, courtesy of the Valentinos, who also owed Marcus a favor. In Night City, favors were currency, and Marcus had been collecting them for months. He adjusted the collar of the stolen white coat, feeling the weight of the Lexington pistol tucked against his ribs, and walked toward the entrance. The pneumatic doors hissed open, exhaling a blast of climate-controlled air that smelled like antiseptic and expensive perfume. Inside, the lobby stretched out like a cathedral to modern medicine. All white marble and chrome fixtures, with a massive holographic display rotating overhead, showing statistics about survival rates and customer satisfaction scores that were probably about as real as the promise of immortality they sold to wealthy clientele. The receptionist, a young woman with synthetic skin so perfect it looked plastic, barely glanced at him as he passed. Her eyes were vacant, probably jacked into the company network, processing a dozen different information streams while her meat body performed the muscle memory of basic human interaction. Marcus had seen that look 1,000 times. Night City didn't just take your money. It took your presence, your awareness, leaving you a ghost in your own skin. The elevator ride to the 37th floor took 20 seconds, each one measured by the ascending floor numbers glowing above the doors and the gradual pressure change that made his ears pop. Muzak played softly from hidden speakers, some corpo-approved jazz that had been focus grouped to reduce anxiety while waiting. It made Marcus want to rip the speakers out with his bare hands. Floor 37, Executive Medical Services. The doors opened onto a hallway that looked nothing like the sterile utilitarian corridors of the lower levels Marcus had seen in surveillance footage. This was luxury, the kind that reminded patients they were special, valuable, worth the million eddies their corporations had invested in keeping them alive. Real wood paneling on the walls. Original art, not hollows. The carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of footsteps. A nurse approached, her smile as synthetic as everything else in this place. "Dr. Reeves, we weren't expecting you on this floor today." Marcus didn't miss a beat, pulling the persona around himself like armor. "Last-minute scheduling change. I'm covering for Dr. Yamamoto. He had a family emergency." The lie was smooth, practiced. Yamamoto really did have a family emergency, one that Marcus had arranged through another intermediary. In Night City, everything was connected if you knew how to pull the right strings. "Oh, of course," the nurse said, checking her terminal. Her eyes flickered as she accessed the hospital network, and for a moment, Marcus wondered if the false credentials would hold. If they didn't, he was looking at a swift execution by building security, no questions asked. Corporate property, corporate rules. But the credentials held. The Netrunner had done good work, weaving the fake identity so deep into the system it would take a dedicated audit to find the seams. The nurse nodded, satisfied. The VIP patient in Suite 3712 is ready for his post-op consultation. All the files are in the system. Thank you, Marcus said, and moved past her before she could ask any more questions. Suite 3712 sat at the end of the corridor, its door marked with a discreet golden plaque that read, "Private, authorized personnel only." Marcus placed his palm against the biometric scanner, feeling the tingle of lasers reading the false prints embedded in his synthetic skin. The door clicked open. Inside, the suite looked more like a 5-star hotel room than a hospital. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Night City's sprawl, the mega-buildings rising like grave markers in the distance, their surfaces crawling with advertisements and neon signs. A massive bed dominated the center of the room, surrounded by medical equipment so advanced it probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. And in that bed, propped up on pillows that probably cost more than Marcus's entire apartment, lay Robert Sinclair, Chief Operating Officer of Arasaka Medical Division, the man who'd signed off on the policy changes that let Marcus's brother die. Sinclair looked up as Marcus entered. His eyes, one natural, one obviously cybernetic, focusing with predatory intensity. "You're not Yamamoto." "Dr. Yamamoto couldn't make it," Marcus said, closing the door behind him. "I'm Dr. Reeves. I'll be handling your consultation today." "I don't know you." Sinclair's hand moved toward the call button on the bed rail. Marcus moved faster, crossing the room in 3 strides and placing his hand over Sinclair's. Not forcefully, but firmly enough to communicate intent. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. We need to talk, Mr. Sinclair. About Trauma Team. About the medical policies you implemented last quarter. About the people who died because of them." For a moment, the room hung in perfect silence. Through the window, an AV passed by, its nav lights painting streaks of red and blue across the chrome fixtures. Sinclair's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw the calculation happening behind those eyes. The risk assessment, the consideration of options. "Who are you?" Sinclair asked finally. "Someone who lost a brother because your company decided his life wasn't worth the cost of responding to an emergency call." Marcus pulled his hand back, letting Sinclair see he wasn't here to kill him. Not yet, anyway. "Someone who wants to understand how a medical corporation can claim to save lives while letting people bleed out in the streets." Sinclair actually smiled at that. A thin, mirthless expression. "You think you're the first person to ask me that question? You think I lose sleep over the operational decisions required to run a profitable medical service in Night City? I think you're a man who's never had to worry about whether you can afford to stay alive," Marcus said. "I think you've spent your entire life insulated from the consequences of your decisions by layers of corporate bureaucracy and security. I think you have no idea what it's like to watch someone die because they're 48 hours late on a payment. Then you think wrong." Sinclair shifted in the bed, and Marcus noticed for the first time the extensive bandaging around his torso, the telltale signs of major surgery. "I know exactly what it's like. I know because I design those systems. I calculate the profit margins on human life every single day. Do you want to know the truth about corporate hospitals, Dr. Reeves? Or whoever you really are?" Marcus said nothing, waiting. "The truth is that medicine in Night City isn't about saving lives. It never has been. It's about managing resources in a system where demand infinitely exceeds supply." Sinclair gestured toward the window, toward the sprawling city beyond. "There are 6 million people in Night City. Maybe more. Most of them can't afford basic health care. They live in filth, eat synthetic protein that's probably killing them slowly, breathe air so toxic it causes cancer by age 30. And every single one of them wants to live forever. So you let them die," Marcus said. "We let them make choices," Sinclair corrected. "Trauma Team isn't a public service. It's a private insurance company. People pay premiums for guaranteed emergency response. If they don't pay, they don't get service. That's not cruelty. That's basic economics. My brother paid for 12 years. He missed one payment because he lost his job at the factory. 48 hours late, and you let him die. Your brother violated the terms of his contract. Sinclair's voice held no sympathy, no remorse. Trauma team protocols are very clear. Payment must be current at time of emergency. No exceptions. If we made exceptions, where would it end? 1 late payment? 2, people would stop paying entirely and the whole system would collapse. The system is already collapsed, Marcus said. You just can't see it from up here in your luxury suite with your millionetti cybernetic implants. Oh, I see it perfectly. Sinclair leaned forward, and despite the bandages and the obvious pain of movement, his intensity was palpable. I see it every day in the numbers. Mortality rates, infection statistics, organ failure projections. I see a city that's dying slowly, poisoning itself from within. And I see corporations like Trauma Team, like Arasaka Medical, offering the only lifeline that matters, the chance to buy more time. At what cost? At whatever cost the market will bear. Sinclair settled back against the pillows. You want to know the dark truth about corporate hospitals? Here it is. We're not in the business of curing diseases or healing injuries. We're in the business of managing mortality, extending it for those who can pay, accelerating it for those who can't. The purpose of medical care in Night City isn't to help people live better lives. It's to extract maximum profit from the dying process. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd expected corporate callousness, bureaucratic indifference, even malice. But this clinical acceptance of mass death as a business model was something else entirely. Every hospital in this city operates on the same principle, Sinclair continued. We calculate the expected lifetime value of each patient, their earning potential, their insurance coverage, their corporate affiliations. Then we determine the optimal level of care to maximize profit. Sometimes that means cutting-edge treatments and experimental procedures. Sometimes it means palliative care and managed decline. And sometimes, he paused, his cybernetic eye glinting in the city lights. Sometimes it means no care at all. You're talking about triage, Marcus said. I'm talking about resource allocation on a civilizational scale. Night City produces more trauma cases than any major city in the world. Gunshots, stabbings, cyberpsychosis, industrial accidents, gang warfare, corporate conflicts. The hospitals are overwhelmed. We could spend every eddy in the corporate treasury and still not have enough beds, enough doctors, enough equipment to treat everyone who needs care. So we make choices. We prioritize. You prioritize profit. We prioritize sustainability. Sinclair's tone sharpened. Do you think these hospitals run on good intentions? The equipment in this room alone costs more than most people will earn in their entire lives. The doctors have decades of training. The pharmaceutical research that produced the drugs keeping me alive right now cost billions in development. Someone has to pay for all of that. And in a city where the government is a joke and public services barely exist, that someone is the corporations. Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the neon sprawl below. From this height, Night City looked almost beautiful, the violence and suffering abstracted into patterns of light and shadow. He could see the trauma team building in the distance, its crimson cross beacon pulsing like a heartbeat. So what you're saying is that the system is working as designed, he said quietly. That my brother's death wasn't a tragedy or a mistake. It was a calculated business decision. Your brother's death was inevitable the moment he couldn't afford his premium, Sinclair said. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear. But it's the truth. In Night City, there's no safety net. No public option, no charity care. There's only the market. And the market decided your brother's life wasn't worth the cost of keeping him alive. Marcus turned back to face Sinclair. And you're okay with that? My feelings are irrelevant. I'm a cog in a machine much larger than myself. If I quit tomorrow, someone else would take my place and make the same decisions. Because those decisions are dictated by the fundamental economics of scarcity. We don't have enough to save everyone, so we save the ones who can pay. While people like my brother bleed out in the streets. Yes, Sinclair met his gaze without flinching. That's the price of living in Night City. That's the price of a system built entirely on corporate power with no social contract, no collective responsibility. Everyone is expendable except the ones who make themselves valuable to the corporations. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the city continued its endless churn, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, each one a story of survival or failure in the brutal arithmetic of late-stage capitalism. Marcus thought about his brother, about the life he'd lived and the death he'd died, and wondered if this was really it, if there was truly no accountability, no justice, only the cold logic of profit and loss. "You came here to kill me," Sinclair said. "It wasn't a question. I came here for answers," Marcus replied. "I got them. And now?" Marcus pulled the Lexington from inside his coat, the weapon's weight familiar in his hand. Sinclair didn't flinch, didn't call for help. He just watched with that same clinical detachment, as if his own death was just another data point to be analyzed. "Now I understand something I didn't before," Marcus said. "You're not the problem. You're a symptom. Killing you wouldn't change anything. Someone else would take your place, and the machine would keep running. So you're going to let me live. I'm going to let you prove something." Marcus kept the gun trained on Sinclair. "You said the system is about resource allocation, about maximizing value. Fine. I want you to allocate resources to help people who actually need it. People in the streets. People who can't afford trauma team premiums or corporate health plans." Sinclair actually laughed at that, a harsh, bitter sound. "With what authority? I'm a COO, not a philanthropist. I answer to shareholders. If I started giving away medical care for free, I'd be fired within a week. Then don't give it away. Make it profitable." Marcus stepped closer. "You're supposed to be a genius at managing healthcare economics, right? Figure out a model that actually works. One that doesn't require letting people die to maintain profit margins. It doesn't exist. Then create it. Or prove that you're exactly what I think you are. A coward hiding behind spreadsheets while the city burns." For the first time, Marcus saw something flicker in Sinclair's expression. Not fear, not anger. Something else. Maybe recognition. Maybe the faintest echo of a conscience buried under years of corporate indoctrination. "You're naive," Sinclair said finally. "You think one person can change a system this entrenched. I think people change systems every day. They just need a reason to try." Marcus lowered the gun, but didn't holster it. "You've got money, power, connections. You understand how the medical industry works better than almost anyone in this city. If you wanted to make things better, you could. The question is whether you care enough to try." Sinclair was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant, calculating. Marcus could almost see the gears turning, running probability analyses, risk assessments, all the mental machinery of a corporate executive evaluating a proposal. "There's a clinic in Pacifica," Sinclair said slowly. "Street dock operation, barely functional. They treat gang members, street kids, anyone who walks through the door regardless of ability to pay. They're drowning in debt and barely have enough supplies to operate. If I were to, hypothetically, arrange for some equipment donations, pharmaceutical supplies, maybe some funding through a shell corporation, it wouldn't change the fundamental economics, but it might save a few lives." "It's a start," Marcus said. "It's also corporate fraud, resource misallocation, and a dozen other violations of Arasaka policy. If anyone finds out, I'll lose everything. Then don't get caught." Marcus finally holstered the Lexington. "You're a smart man, Mr. Sinclair. You've built your career on finding loopholes and optimizing systems. I'm sure you can figure out how to help people without tanking your quarterly numbers." Sinclair studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll see what I can do. No promises. That's all I'm asking." Marcus turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. My brother's name was David Chen. He worked at the Biotechnica factory in Santo Domingo. He had a wife and a daughter. He wasn't just a number on your spreadsheet. He was a person. A good person who deserved better than bleeding out on a sidewalk while your AV ran verification protocols." "I'll remember," Sinclair said quietly. Whether he meant it or not, Marcus couldn't tell. But it was something. A crack in the corporate armor. Maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe Sinclair would go back to his spreadsheets and profit margins and forget this conversation ever happened. But maybe, just maybe, something would change. Marcus left the suite and made his way back through the pristine corridors of the executive floor, past the vacant-eyed nurses and chrome-plated security, back down the elevator to the lobby, where the holographic statistics still spun overhead, proclaiming salvation for those who could afford it. He walked out into the neon-drenched night, letting the rain wash over him, feeling the weight of the city pressing down from all sides. The truth about corporate hospitals in Night City wasn't complicated. It was brutally simple. Life was a commodity, death was a market force, and healthcare was just another mechanism for transferring wealth from the desperate to the powerful. The whole system was designed to extract maximum profit from human suffering, to turn disease and injury into revenue streams, to make survival itself a luxury good available only to those with the right insurance coverage or corporate backing. But here was the other truth, the one Marcus had learned tonight. Systems were made of people, and people, no matter how deeply embedded in corporate machinery, could still make choices, could still decide that profit margins weren't the only metric that mattered, could still sometimes choose humanity over efficiency. Whether that would be enough to change anything in a city as broken as Night City remained to be seen. But it was a start. Marcus walked through the rain-slick streets of Watson, past the homeless encampments and the street vendors hawking black market pharmaceuticals, past the gang members posted on corners and the corpo security checkpoints, past all the accumulated damage of a society that had decided some lives mattered more than others. His optics flickered, pulling up the contact information for the Pacifica clinic Sinclair had mentioned, a place called The Last Stop, run by a street doc named Olivia Reyes, who had a reputation for never turning anyone away. He'd go there tomorrow, see what they needed, what resources he could funnel their way through the channels Sinclair opened up. It wouldn't be enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. His brother was still dead. That wouldn't change. But maybe the next David Chen, the next person who fell through the cracks in the system, would have a chance. Maybe the dark truth about corporate hospitals could be answered with a different truth, that people could choose to be better than the systems they served. It was a small hope in a city built on broken dreams. But in Night City, sometimes small hopes were all you had. The weeks that followed Marcus's confrontation with Sinclair unfolded with a strange, disjointed quality, like watching events through someone else's optics. He'd expected retribution, a trauma team hit squad, corporate assassins, a mysterious accident in a dark alley. That's how these things usually went in Night City. You crossed a corpo. You paid in blood. But the retribution never came. Instead, 3 days after their meeting, Marcus received an anonymous message on a burner holo. Just coordinates and a time. The coordinates led to a storage facility in the industrial sector of Santo Domingo, the kind of place where containers full of questionable cargo sat waiting for buyers who asked no questions. The time was 3 a.m., when even Night City's perpetual activity reached something approximating a lull. Marcus arrived early, watching from the shadows as the unmarked cargo truck pulled up to the designated container. 2 people emerged, a woman in street clothes who moved with the efficient precision of former military, and a younger man whose nervous energy marked him as someone unused to this kind of operation. They opened the container, and even from a distance Marcus could see what was inside. Medical equipment. Boxes and boxes of it. Diagnostic scanners, surgical instruments, pharmaceutical supplies, portable defibrillators, the kinds of things that kept people alive in emergencies. All of it high-grade corporate stock, each piece worth more on the black market than most street docs made in a month. The woman noticed him then, her hand moving toward what was probably a weapon. But Marcus stepped into the light, hands visible. No threat. They studied each other for a moment. 2 people engaged in something that wasn't quite crime, wasn't quite charity, existed in some gray zone that Night City specialized in creating. "You Marcus Chen?" the woman asked. "Depends who's asking." "Someone who was told you'd know what to do with this." She gestured at the container. "Address in Pacifica. Clinic called The Last Stop. This shipment needs to get there tonight. After that, there'll be more. Regular deliveries. But they need to be quiet. No records. No trail back to the source." "Sinclair sent you," Marcus said. The woman's expression didn't change. "I don't know who that is. I'm just following instructions. You want the stuff or not? Marcus thought about it for maybe half a second. The equipment was almost certainly stolen, diverted from legitimate corporate inventory through some accounting sleight of hand. Taking possession would make him an accessory to corporate fraud. Using it would implicate everyone at the clinic. It was risky, dangerous, exactly the kind of thing that got people disappeared in Night City. "Yeah," he said. "I want it." The transfer took 30 minutes, loading everything into a van Marcus had borrowed from a Valentino contact. The woman and her nervous assistant left without another word, the truck vanishing back into the industrial sprawl like it had never existed. Marcus sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking at the boxes of medical supplies piled in the back, and allowed himself to feel something that might have been hope. Then he drove to Pacifica. The last stop occupied the ground floor of a decrepit mega-building on the edge of the combat zone, the kind of structure that probably hadn't seen maintenance since it was built 40 years ago. Graffiti covered every surface. Territorial markers from a dozen different gangs layered over each other like archaeological strata. The windows were either broken or blocked with corrugated metal. Water damage had left brown stains running down the concrete like old blood. But the lights were on inside, visible through the gaps in the window coverings, and as Marcus approached, he could hear voices. Someone crying in pain. Someone else speaking in soothing tones, trying to provide comfort in a place where comfort was a rare commodity. He knocked on the reinforced security door. After a moment, it cracked open, and a woman peered out. Late 30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Eyes that held the kind of exhaustion that came from too many sleepless nights fighting losing battles. Her hands were stained with dried blood. "We're full," she said. "I've got 3 gunshot victims, 2 overdoses, and a kid with a cyberware infection. I can't take anyone else right now." "I'm not here as a patient," Marcus said. "Are you Olivia Reyes?" Suspicion flickered across her face. "Who's asking?" "Someone with a van full of medical supplies you probably need." The door opened wider, and Olivia stepped out, her hand resting on what looked like a very illegal Carnage shotgun tucked into her waistband. She looked past Marcus at the van, then back at him, trying to calculate the angle, figure out what this was going to cost her. "What's the price?" she asked. Because in Night City, nothing was ever really free. "No price," Marcus said. "Consider it a donation." "I don't believe in donations." "Then consider it an investment in keeping people alive who otherwise wouldn't be." Olivia studied him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. She whistled, and 2 people emerged from inside. A young man with military-grade cyberware, and a woman whose hands marked her as a surgeon of some skill. Together they started unloading the van, carrying boxes into the clinic with the careful urgency of people who understood how valuable this cargo was. "How long have you been running this place?" Marcus asked. 6 years, Olivia said, watching her people work. "Took over from the doc who trained me after the voodoo boys put a bullet in his head for treating the wrong patient. Been fighting to keep the doors open ever since. Must be hard. No corporate backing, no steady funding. Hard doesn't begin to cover it." She turned to look at him directly. "Most nights I go to bed wondering if tomorrow's the day we run out of antibiotics or anesthetic or the one drug that's keeping someone from dying of organ failure. I've performed surgery with black market scalpels and bootleg anesthetic. I've watched people die because I didn't have the right equipment or the right supplies. So yeah, whoever sent you, whatever their angle is, I'll take it. I'll take anything that helps me save one more life. What if I told you this is just the first delivery, that there'll be more? Regular supplies, better equipment, maybe even funding for expanding operations." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Then I'd ask what Corpo decided to grow a conscience. Because that kind of support doesn't happen without someone powerful deciding it's in their interest. Does it matter? It matters if they want something in return. It matters if they're using this clinic as a front for something worse. It matters if taking their help means I'm making a deal with the devil." Marcus respected that. Pragmatism was survival in Night City, but so was maintaining some kind of moral line, however thin. The person funding this wants to prove something. To themselves, maybe to the city. I can't promise their motives are pure, but I can promise the supplies are real, and the help is legitimate. And what do you get out of it? "Peace," Marcus said quietly, "or something close to it." Olivia must have heard something in his voice, seen something in his face, because her expression softened slightly. You lost someone. My brother. Bled out while trauma team ran payment verification. Jesus. She shook her head. I'm sorry. I've seen that happen too many times. Good people dying because they can't afford the cost of staying alive. It's why I do this. Why I keep the doors open even when it seems impossible. How many people do you treat here? Depends on the week. 50? 100? More during gang wars or when some corpo decides to crack down on the streets. We take anyone who comes through the door. Can't always save them, but we try. Sometimes that's all you can do. Try. They finished unloading the van as the sky began to lighten, the perpetual haze over Night City turning from black to dirty gray. Marcus helped carry the last boxes inside and got his first real look at the clinic's operation. It was organized chaos. The main room had been divided into treatment areas by hanging sheets and privacy screens, each one occupied by a patient in various states of distress. The gunshot victims Olivia had mentioned were being tended by her staff. The young man with the military cyberware was cleaning wounds with practiced efficiency, while the surgeon was prepping someone for what looked like emergency surgery. Medical equipment lined the walls, most of it outdated or jury-rigged to keep functioning. The smell of antiseptic fought a losing battle against the odors of blood, sweat, and the general decay that permeated every building in Pacifica. But people were being helped. Lives were being saved. In a city where healthcare was a luxury reserved for those who could afford it, this place was a lifeline for people who had nothing else. How do you keep this place running? Marcus asked. Donations, mostly, from people who've been treated here and want to give back. Some street vendors kick in protection money. They know if they get hurt, we'll patch them up. The voodoo boys leave us alone because we treat their people when they need it. And sometimes, she paused, looking at the boxes of equipment they'd just brought in. Sometimes someone shows up with a van full of supplies and asks no questions. Marcus spent the next hour helping where he could, moving equipment, organizing supplies, learning the layout of the clinic. Olivia put him to work immediately, the kind of person who didn't waste resources, and Marcus found himself grateful for the distraction. There was something cleansing about physical labor, about helping in a direct, tangible way. Around 7 a.m., when the morning shift was arriving and the night shift was preparing to leave, Marcus finally got ready to go. Olivia walked him to the door, her exhaustion more visible in the daylight, filtering through the metal-covered windows. Thank you, she said simply. For the supplies, for the help, for whatever connection made this possible. Thank you for doing this, Marcus replied. For keeping the doors open when it would be easier to give up. Giving up isn't an option. Not when people are dying. She hesitated, then added, if your corpo contact is serious about continued support, tell them we need a secure communication channel. Something the gangs can't intercept and the other corpos can't trace. And we need it to be long-term. I can't plan for expansion or hire additional staff if I don't know whether the funding will disappear next month. I'll pass that along. Marcus left the clinic as the city was waking up around him, the streets filling with workers heading to their corpo jobs, and street vendors setting up their stalls, and gang members changing shifts on their corner territories. Life in Night City, continuing its brutal cycle. He pulled out his personal holo and sent a brief encrypted message to an anonymous account. Delivery successful. Clinic functional, but needs secure comms and long-term commitment. They're doing real work. The response came 3 hours later. Just 3 words. Working on it. True to that cryptic promise, things began to change. Slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. A secure communication system appeared, installed by technicians who arrived without warning and left without conversation. Funding started flowing through a shell corporation with no obvious connection to Arasaka or any other major player. More supplies arrived on a regular schedule. Pharmaceuticals, surgical equipment, diagnostic tools, even a cutting-edge biomonitor system that could track patient vitals remotely. Olivia expanded operations, hiring 2 more doctors and a handful of nurses, all of them people who'd been working in corporate hospitals and burned out on the moral compromises required. The clinic started taking on more complex cases, performing surgeries that previously would have been impossible. Word spread through the combat zones and the street communities. There was a place in Pacifica where you could get real medical care, not just a quick patch job. even if you couldn't pay. And Marcus watched it all happen, visiting the clinic regularly, helping where he could, becoming part of the strange ecosystem of volunteers and staff who kept the place running. He learned the patterns of street medicine, how to stabilize trauma victims with minimal equipment, how to identify cyberware infections before they turned fatal, how to triage when resources were limited and choices had to be made about who got treatment first. He also learned about the people who came through the doors. The gang member shot in a territorial dispute who turned out to be a father of 3 trying to earn enough to get his family out of Pacifica. The joy toy with a black market neuralware implant that was slowly killing her but that she couldn't afford to have removed. The kid couldn't have been more than 15 who'd tried to solo a cyberpsycho in the hopes of claiming the bounty and had nearly died for it. Every one of them was a story, a life that mattered beyond whatever economic value the corporations assigned to it. Every one of them was someone's brother, someone's daughter, someone's friend. And every one of them deserved better than a system that treated their existence as a line item to be optimized for profit. 2 months after that first supply delivery, Marcus found himself back in the Watson Medical Center. Not breaking in this time, but walking through the front doors with a legitimate visitor pass arranged through Sinclair's office. They met in a different room this time. Not the luxury executive suite, but a small conference room on the administrative floor, spare and utilitarian. Sinclair looked different, thinner, more tired, like the weight of the double life he was leading was physically manifesting. His cybernetic eyes still gleamed with cold precision, but there were shadows under the natural one. "The clinic is doing well," Marcus said without preamble. "Olivia's expanded operations. They're treating 3 times as many patients as before." "I know. I've been monitoring the supply requisitions." Sinclair pulled up a holographic display showing columns of numbers and resource allocations. "The cost is significant, more than I initially projected, but manageable. For now, I've been routing funds through procurement irregularities and maintenance budgets. As long as no one looks too closely at the line items, we're fine. But it's a delicate balancing act." "Is it worth it?" Marcus asked. "From your perspective, I mean. Is saving a few hundred extra lives worth the risk to your career?" Sinclair was quiet for a long moment, his fingers dancing through the holographic data, pulling up patient statistics and survival rates. "Do you know what the mortality rate is in Pacifica? For trauma cases? High. 73% without immediate medical intervention. 73% of people who suffer serious injuries die because there's no help available. That's not a statistic. That's a massacre happening in slow motion every single day." He closed the display. "Since we started supporting the last stop, the rate has dropped to 58% in their service area. We've saved approximately 200 lives that otherwise would have been lost. That's not nothing. But is it enough? No, it's not even close to enough. There are a dozen neighborhoods like Pacifica. Hundreds of places where people die from preventable causes because they can't afford treatment. One clinic, no matter how well funded, can't address a problem that systemic. So what's the next step?" Sinclair looked at him with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking about that. About what you said. That I have the resources and knowledge to make a real difference if I chose to. It was naive, arrogant even. But also, not entirely wrong." He pulled up another display, this one showing a complex organizational chart. "This is the structure of Arasaka Medical Division. At the top, you have the board of directors and the C-suite. Below that, dozens of departments and sub-departments, each with their own budgets and operational mandates. And buried deep in this structure, there are inefficiencies, redundancies, waste, resources that could be reallocated if someone knew how to work the system." "You want to expand what you're doing," Marcus said, understanding dawning. "I want to create a network. Not just one clinic, but 10. 20, all across Night City, providing care to people who can't afford corporate medicine, all funded through careful exploitation of the same corporate systems that currently let those people die." "That's insane. The scope of fraud you're talking about is extensive, yes, and incredibly risky. If anyone discovers what I'm doing, it won't just end my career. It'll likely end with me in a prison cell or worse. Arasaka doesn't tolerate executives who steal corporate resources, even for altruistic purposes." Sinclair leaned forward. But here's what I've realized. I spent 20 years building systems that optimize death, that calculate the economic value of human life and allocate medical resources accordingly. I'm very good at it. I'm one of the best in the world at turning healthcare into a profit center. And now I want to use those skills for something else. I want to prove that medical care doesn't have to be a luxury good, that it's possible to provide quality treatment to people regardless of their ability to pay, that the systems I helped create can be subverted to actually help people instead of exploiting them. Marcus studied the man across the table, trying to reconcile this version of Sinclair with the cold corporate executive from 2 months ago. What changed? Why are you really doing this? Sinclair was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Marcus had ever heard it. I had a daughter. Did I mention that? Probably not. I don't talk about her. She died 7 years ago. Car accident in Westbrook. Some gonk running corpo-grade cyberware decided traffic laws didn't apply to him. Hit her vehicle head-on at 80 miles an hour. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. She died instantly. Trauma team was there within 90 seconds because she had the premium family plan. Best response time in the industry. Didn't matter. She was gone before they even opened the door. Sinclair's cybernetic eye dimmed slightly, as if even his Chrome couldn't maintain perfect efficiency in the face of that memory. For a long time, I told myself it was different, that her death was random, unavoidable, nothing to do with the systems I helped build. But that's a lie. The same systems that would have let your brother die were the ones that failed to prevent some Chrome-addled idiot from getting cyberware he couldn't safely use, failed to provide adequate traffic enforcement, failed to create a city where people could live without constant risk of random violence. You can't blame yourself for everything wrong with Night City, can't I? I spent my career making it worse, making it easier for corporations to extract profit from suffering. I can't bring my daughter back. I can't save your brother. But maybe I can make sure fewer people die from the same systemic failures that killed them. Marcus understood then. Really understood. This wasn't about redemption or charity or even guilt. It was about rage. Rage at a system that had taken something irreplaceable and offered nothing in return except the hollow efficiency of optimized death management. Sinclair wasn't trying to save the city. He was trying to hurt the system that had hurt him. Okay, Marcus said. Let's do it. Let's build your network. You understand the risks? I understand that doing nothing is also a choice. And I'm done doing nothing. Sinclair nodded. And for the first time since Marcus had met him, something like respect flickered in his expression. Then we need to be smart about this. Methodical. We can't just throw resources at the problem. We need to identify the highest impact locations, recruit trustworthy personnel, establish secure supply chains, create accounting frameworks that can survive audits. You're talking about building a parallel healthcare system. I'm talking about building something that should have existed from the beginning. Something that actually serves people instead of exploiting them. Sinclair pulled up a map of Night City, marked with dozens of red dots. These are high mortality zones, places where the death rate from preventable causes is highest. Each one represents hundreds of potential patients who die every year because they lack access to basic medical care. Marcus studied the map, seeing his city rendered in terms of death and survival, profit and loss. How many clinics are we talking about? To make a meaningful impact? At least 20, maybe 30. All operating independently but connected through secure networks, sharing resources and knowledge. It'll take years to build out fully, but we can start with the highest priority locations. Starting with Pacifica. The last stop becomes our template. We refine the operational model there, figure out what works, then replicate it elsewhere. Sinclair began highlighting specific locations on the map. Rancho Coronado needs immediate attention. Industrial accidents there are off the charts. Glen could support a pediatric-focused clinic. Santo Domingo needs trauma care for factory workers. They spent the next 3 hours planning, sketching out the framework for what Sinclair was calling Project Phoenix, a network of street clinics funded through corporate resources diverted from their intended purposes. It was ambitious to the point of insanity, requiring precise coordination across dozens of fronts while maintaining absolute operational security. It was also, Marcus realized, Exactly what Night City needed. Over the following months, the network began to take shape. The second clinic opened in Rancho Coronado, housed in a converted warehouse, and staffed by doctors Olivia recruited from her network of burned-out corporate medical professionals. The third followed in Glen, specializing in pediatric care, treating kids who'd grown up breathing toxic air and eating contaminated food. Then Santo Domingo, then Northside, each one carefully established, secured, and integrated into the growing network. Marcus became the de facto coordinator, moving between clinics, troubleshooting problems, maintaining the connections that kept everything running. He learned to speak the language of street medicine, to navigate the complex politics of gang territories and corporate boundaries, to solve problems that ranged from supply chain logistics to armed confrontations with groups who saw the clinics as potential targets for robbery. He also learned about hope. Real hope. Not the synthetic corporate variety, but the kind that came from watching someone survive who shouldn't have, from seeing children play in the streets who would have died from untreated infections, from hearing gratitude in voices that usually held only resignation. The network wasn't perfect. They lost patients they should have saved. Supplies ran short. Equipment failed. One clinic in Kabuki was hit by the tiger claws and had to shut down for 2 weeks. Another in Vista del Rey faced pressure from local gangs who wanted protection money. There were constant challenges, constant threats, the perpetual sense that the whole operation could collapse if the wrong person asked the wrong question. But it worked. Against all probability, against all the structural forces arrayed against it, the network worked. Mortality rates dropped in the areas they served. People started seeking treatment for conditions they'd previously just accepted as inevitable. Children born in the combat zones had a better chance of surviving to adulthood. It wasn't enough to fix Night City's systemic problems, but it was something. A small light in the darkness. 6 months into Project Phoenix, Marcus received an encrypted message from Sinclair. Need to meet. Urgent. Same conference room, tonight. He arrived to find Sinclair looking worse than ever. Hollow-eyed, gaunt, his movements twitchy with what might have been combat stims or just exhaustion. The holographic displays around him showed a maze of financial data, audit reports, personnel files. "We have a problem," Sinclair said without preamble. "Internal audit. They're looking at procurement irregularities. If they dig deep enough, they'll find the diverted resources. Can you cover it?" "I've been trying, but there's too much missing. Too many supply requests that don't match patient load. Too many maintenance expenses that don't correspond to actual repairs. Someone smart enough will notice the patterns. How long do we have? Days, maybe a week." Sinclair pulled up a report showing the audit progress. They're 3 layers away from discovering the shell corporations. Once they do that, everything unravels. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "The clinics will lose their funding, their supply chains, everything we've built in the last 6 months. Sinclair looked at him with eyes that held too much weight. "I'm sorry. I thought I could maintain the deception longer. I was wrong." They sat in silence, the holographic data painting their faces in blue light, showing the death of their project in columns of numbers and audit findings. Outside the window, Night City continued its indifferent existence, caring nothing for their small rebellion against its systems. "There's one option," Sinclair said finally. "I could come forward, admit to the fraud, take full responsibility, say it was personal embezzlement, not an organized network. They'd fire me, probably prosecute, but it might protect the clinics, give them time to find alternative funding. They'd destroy you. Yes, but the clinics would survive." Marcus thought about that. About Sinclair walking into corporate justice for the crime of trying to help people, about one man sacrificing everything to preserve something that should have existed from the beginning. It was noble in its way, also incredibly stupid. "No," Marcus said. "Excuse me? You don't get to martyr yourself. We need you alive and functional to keep the network running." Marcus stood pacing, thinking through angles and possibilities. "The clinics can survive losing corporate funding. They did before we started this. They'll have to scale back, reduce operations, but they'll survive. What they can't survive is losing the institutional knowledge you have about how these systems work, the connections, the understanding of corporate medicine. So what do you suggest? We go public. Sinclair stared at him. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to protect what we've built. Marcus pulled up his own interface, accessing contacts he'd made over the months of running the network. We've helped thousands of people, saved hundreds of lives. Those people have families, friends, communities. If we expose what we've been doing, show the city that corporate medical resources were being used to actually help people instead of maximizing profit, it creates a different kind of pressure. You want to weaponize public opinion against Arasaka. I want to make it politically expensive to shut down the clinics. If we're quiet about it, they can make us disappear without consequence. But if we're loud, if we show the city what's been happening, they have to worry about the optics. About looking like monsters who shut down clinics serving the poorest neighborhoods. Arasaka doesn't care about optics. No, but their competitors do. Militech would love a story about Arasaka executives committing fraud. Trauma Team would use it to justify market expansion. Even the gangs might see advantage in supporting community clinics. We make this a political issue instead of a corporate one. Sinclair considered that, his cybernetic eye flickering as he ran probability analyses. It could work. Maybe. But it would require perfect timing and absolute control of the narrative. If we get it wrong, we just accelerate our own destruction. We're already destroyed, Marcus pointed out. The audit will find the discrepancies. When it does, we lose everything anyway. This way, at least we go down swinging. You have contacts who could spread the story? I know some people. News media, independent journalists, fixers who trade in information. Give me 24 hours, and I can have this story everywhere. Sinclair nodded slowly. Do it. I'll prepare a statement admitting to the diversion of resources and explaining the purpose. We'll release everything simultaneously. The financial data, the clinic locations, the survival statistics. Make it too big to bury. They spent that night preparing. Marcus reached out to every contact he'd cultivated, every person who might be willing to carry their story. Journalists hungry for a corporate scandal. Street reporters who covered the combat zones. Even some corpo media who might see advantage in embarrassing Arasaka. By dawn, he had commitments from a dozen different sources. Sinclair prepared the data dump, a comprehensive package showing exactly how Project Phoenix had operated, complete with financial records proving the diverted resources and medical statistics demonstrating the impact. It was confession, justification, and indictment all at once, carefully crafted to present their actions in the best possible light while making it impossible for Arasaka to deny what had happened. They released everything at noon on a Tuesday, timing it for maximum visibility in Night City's news cycle. Within an hour, every major media outlet had the story. Within 2 hours, it was the top trending topic on every social network. By evening, protest crowds had gathered outside Arasaka medical facilities across the city, demanding the company continue funding the clinics. The reaction was explosive. Public opinion fractured along predictable lines. Corporate loyalists condemned the theft of company resources, while street communities celebrated what they saw as justice. Political figures scrambled to position themselves, some calling for prosecution, others praising the humanitarian effort. The media devoured the story, running exposés on healthcare inequality in Night City, comparing survival rates in neighborhoods with and without clinic access. And the clinics stayed open. In the chaos of competing narratives and public pressure, Arasaka found itself unable to simply shut down the facilities without massive public backlash. Instead, they announced an investigation that would take months, during which the clinics would continue operating under temporary oversight. Marcus watched it all unfold from a safe house in Japantown, monitoring media feeds and coordinating with the clinic directors to ensure they could continue operations during the transition. Olivia reported that the last stop had been flooded with volunteers and donations from street communities grateful for the care they'd received. Other clinics told similar stories, people stepping up to support something they saw as genuinely helping their neighborhoods. Sinclair, as expected, was fired. Arasaka released a statement condemning his unauthorized diversion of corporate resources and promising prosecution. But the corporate law enforcement machinery moved slowly, and in the meantime, Sinclair had disappeared into Night City's anonymous masses, his considerable resources and knowledge now fully committed to supporting the clinic network from the shadows. 2 weeks after their public exposure, Marcus and Sinclair met again, this time in a noodle shop in Kabuki, far from the corporate towers and their surveillance networks. Sinclair looked different again. No corporate suit, no obvious chrome, just another face in Night City's endless crowd. "You were right," Sinclair said, pushing noodles around his bowl. "Going public was the right call. The clinics are secure, at least for now. What about you? Are you secure?" "Secure enough. I've got resources stashed away, contacts in places Arasaka can't reach. I'll survive." And Project Phoenix continues. Different funding model now. Legitimate donations, foundation grants, some black market pharmaceutical sales that I probably shouldn't mention. But it's sustainable. The clinics are on solid ground. Marcus nodded, feeling something like satisfaction. "We did it then. We actually changed something." "We made a dent," Sinclair corrected. "Night City still kills more people than our clinics can save. The corporate medical system still prioritizes profit over human life. The fundamental structures that let my daughter and your brother die are still in place. But fewer people are dying now than before." "Yes, fewer people are dying." Sinclair looked up from his noodles. "That has to count for something." They finished their meal in comfortable silence. Two men who'd started as enemies and become something like allies, united by the shared experience of trying to fix a broken system. Around them, Night City flowed on. Millions of lives intersecting and diverging, each one a story of survival or failure in the brutal arithmetic of late-stage capitalism. But now, in some neighborhoods, in some moments, there was a safety net. A place people could go when injured or sick, regardless of their ability to pay. A light in the darkness, however small. As Marcus left the noodle shop and walked back into the neon-drenched streets, he thought about his brother, about the life David had lived, and the death he'd died, and the question of whether any of this made a difference. The clinic network wouldn't bring David back, wouldn't change what had happened on that street corner in Japantown. But maybe the next David Chen would have a chance. Maybe the next person who fell through the cracks would find a hand reaching down to pull them back up. It wasn't justice. It wasn't redemption. It was just people choosing, in small ways and large, to be better than the systems they inherited. To care about something more than profit margins and efficiency metrics. To remember that behind every statistic was a human life that mattered. In Night City, that was as close to hope as anyone got. The dark truth about corporate hospitals was that they were designed to let people die. But the lighter truth, the one Marcus and Sinclair and Olivia and 100 others had fought to prove, was that people could choose differently, could build alternatives, could carve out spaces in the city's steel heart where life mattered more than money. It wasn't much, but sometimes in Night City, not much was enough.